I would like to talk a little bit about sociology. I love sociology. And do you know why I love sociology? It's because it dares to look at human being when we fail, when we don't succeed. And sociology thinks it's very interesting when we not succeed. And if you think about, maybe you know about some famous sociological experiments. For an example, the milligram experiment, when there was a test person giving electric shocks to another test person. There's another one that is called the Solomon-Asch theory, conformity theory test, where there's a test person pointing on lines. And then the group is always saying that the shortest line is the longest one. And finally, the test person is starting to point on the shortest one also. I have always been interested in sociology because it has a very behavioristic approach to human being. It looks at us in a way that is very sympathetic, I think. Because if you look at, for an example, if you look at cinema in general, we are very used to have a certain kind of simple way of describing human beings. We very often have a protagonist and then we have an antagonist. And the protagonist is the one that we are supposed to share for. He's the hero. And then we have the antagonist and he's the bad guy. He's standing for the wrong beliefs. And I think that's a very, very simple and not true way of describing how we are function and how we behave. But sociology, once again, is looking at when we fail and taking these failures as an example in order to learn us something about these failures and trying to learn us something about how we can behave in a different way. So you can have sociology, how do you say, your sociology glasses on you when you watch this film, I think. And I will love to come back and talk more about the film after the screening. So thank you for having me here. Thank you.
I have to ask you, from Guitar Mongoloid, that small, crazy film, to The Square, Palme d'Or, what do you think has changed in your cinema?
Oh my God, it's hard to say. That was 2004, I think, the Guitar Mongoloid. I thank you for giving me a prize in Moscow. That was great. It was a very important prize for us because I think I think it was 3,500 people that saw the films in cinemas in Sweden, and that's not that much for a Swedish movie, of course. So we were very happy of this Moscow prize. No, I mean, I think all the films that I have been made on a production company that I own together with a producer that is a friend of mine. So we have been working together and have like 3 years between every film. So it had been like a continuing work in a certain kind of direction that feels natural, at least for me. So it's hard time to say exactly what changed. No, it feels natural.
You don't think it's like an evolution or something like that? It's the way it is it?
Sorry?
It's the way it is. So you don't think like it's like you're getting bigger or something?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it does. But in you know, when you make a movie, then it's very much about like making something that you are in control over. And that the first movie, The Guitar Mongoloid, and it was like maybe me and 2 other people on set when we were doing that film. And then the production have increased and become bigger. But the most important thing for me have been to be in control in order to create something on set. That have really been the main goal for all of the films. You know, when we are shooting all of the different scenes here, it's we have had maybe 70 shooting days. That is quite much for a feature film. I would say that the average is like maybe half of that or something. So to be in control have been important to me.
You mentioned your producer friend, your partner. It's funny because something happened to her that it's in the film when she was robbed. Is that true?
Well, actually, on Force Majeure, that was my previous film. Then we were two producers, and then was Erik and Marie. And Marie, she told me the story about she got her phone robbed, stolen, and then she tracked it with Find My iPhone on the computer, and she went out together with her mother in the car to the building where they saw that the phone were in that building.
In a danger zone in Stockholm?
In Gothenburg it was actually.
Gothenburg, okay.
Yeah, so it was not, I don't know how dangerous it was. Maybe it was more the fantasy about being that part of this city. But then she also went up with the elevator and put a note in every single mailbox, and she got the phone back also. So it was kind of impressive. So that was a lot of the scenes in the film is actually inspired of things that have happened to me or happened to friends of me. And
things that happen, like we can say weird and stupid things sometimes, no? I know the word stupid can be offensive, but you like that to talk about stupid occurrences.
Well, I think I'm interested in dilemmas. And if you look at a dilemma is when you have two or more choices, but none of them are easy. And I can tell you about a dilemma that also comes from something that a friend of me told me that was in my second feature film, Involuntary. He was going on a bus drive, and he broke the curtain in the toilet of the bus. And he didn't think that much about that, but and the bus journey continued. And then the bus stopped on a place where they were supposed to go out and eat. And when they got back in the bus driver is really, really upset. And he's aiming for a group of youngsters in the bus. And he says, like, you can't break things in the bus. And you can play music and you can have a lot of fun, but you can't break things. And my friend is thinking, is he talking about the curtain or... and then he's thinking, like, well, in 30 seconds this will be over and we will be on our way again. And he's just waiting for the bus driver to go back and sit behind the wheels. And the bus driver goes back and he sits behind the wheels. But instead of continuing driving, he turns off the engine and he takes the mics and he says, I won't continue this journey before the one who did this confesses. And there you have a dilemma. That's a beautiful situation, you know, because it's not easy to say, it was me, I'm sorry. But it's not easy to keep your mouth shut. And what my friend did, he didn't say anything. So suddenly, when it have passed 10 seconds, it's really, really hard to say, I'm sorry, it was me. And it ends up with that bus is standing there for like half an hour or something without, the bus driver refuses to go anywhere. And this is the kind of situations that I love, you know, that we can identify with a dilemma, and we can identify with, oh my God, I would do the same thing.
You mentioned sociology, but do you also think your films have some kind of idea of thinking about psychology as well?
I mean, there of course there's a part of sociology that is about psychology, but you know what I don't want to go into is to try to describe or explain our behavior by looking at our background, like, oh, he had this kind of background, that's why he is behaving in that way. I prefer looking at us as an animal, you know, that we actually are behaving like in this certain way because we are a human being and we are this species. So I really prefer to talk about my films like that they have like a behavioristic approach to it. And sometimes I think it's interesting to compare with nature filming. You know, when a nature filmer is filming buffaloes and lions, and the lions is eating a buffalo kid, the nature filmer, he has sympathy also for the lions, even though they are doing something that is feeling a little bit horrifying. So
that was the monkey. Okay. Questions, please. There's a mic. Can do it in Swedish because we have here a translator. It's not me. Can you just wait for the mic? It's there. Yeah, just shout, please.
Yeah, I was just out of curiosity. Does the people that were filming like beggars or indigents, were they really performing actors or do you use like the real thing?
A lot of the beggars were actually Romanian people that are in Sweden and sitting on the streets and begging. So we were casting them, or street casting them, so to speak. Yeah, and also a lot of the people from the art world was also real art people.
Yeah.
So I have been treating them in the equal way, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that you don't have you never really had a big connection with the art world, though your mother, I think she's a painter or was a painter, so you don't feel like you are an artist, a visual artist.
Well, yeah, in some way I do, but I mean the reason that the film takes place in a contemporary art scene, because the square that you see in the film, that was actually an art piece that me and a friend of mine did in Sweden. But that the square in itself, it came out of an idea that we wanted to create a symbolic place that is reminding us of our role as fellow human beings. A symbolic place that where we can show trust and take responsibility for each other. And I was talking about it more like a pedestrian crossing, as we also do in the film. A pedestrian crossing is a beautiful, beautiful invention. You know, with a couple of lines in the street, we actually have been able to create an agreement that the car drivers should be careful with the pedestrians. Isn't that beautiful?
It's a Franco zone.
With a couple of lines, you know. Another thing that is beautiful with the traffic rules is that the cars are actually driving on the right side of the road. Isn't that fantastic? And in Sweden, in '67, we changed from left-hand traffic to right-hand traffic in one night. We decided we are going to have right-hand traffic instead. And this kind of agreement is pointing out something about us human beings, that we actually are able to create an agreement where we are accepting the rules and following the rules together. And the same idea was with the square, that we should create a symbolic place where we are reminded of our role as fellow human beings. And the rules were very, very simple. It was like, if someone is standing in the square, then it's my obligation to address this person and say, you're standing in the square, how can I help you? And another rule that we had was like, if we are tired and we don't want to carry our luggage, we can put the luggage in the square, because in the square we don't steal.
That is the rule.
Sorry?
It's the rule.
Yeah, and we now this square exists in 4 cities, 2 cities in Sweden and 2 cities in Norway. And we were invited to an art museum, and that's why the film takes place in an art museum, because we used the exhibition that we did in the art museum as a research period for the film also. So that's basically the reason why the film takes place in the contemporary art scene. And yeah. And when I was traveling around to different art museums in the world, I was like all over, like all over Europe and also in North America and so on. What I felt that I saw in the museums was like they had a neon sign on the wall. You know, they had a couple of objects on the floor. They had a Giacometti. They had a Warhol. But I felt like that the visitors that was going to the museums, they were very disconnected from the art. They were like, you know, walking around and looking at the art a little bit, and then they walked out and going to the cafeteria. So I was only trying to portray what I saw in the art museums.
More questions, please.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for this fantastic film. I saw it for the first time in Zurich a few weeks ago, and Mr. Bang, he's an amazing performer. He was so spectacular, the way he talked with us after the show about 39 takes and how to decide what to do with the, what should I call it, Durex condom. forgot what I was going to say. Talking about space, I've been writing to the press this summer, saying that I wanted to do a show this summer in Montpellier during the dance festival called Comment Marcher, but it was too dangerous. I love the idea of the square, but if you watch the people, how the way they're behaving, even in a small place like this, in small places, the way they rush around corners without thinking about what's going to be on the other side, and seem to take delight in aggressing people this way. When I arrived in Lisbon last night from the country, I felt 3 or 4 bodies pushing towards me quite hard in a confrontational way. I've been dancing in the street for 19 years. Rudolf Laban, the great Hungarian dance artist who founded the Laban Centre in London, said that movement is the architecture of the space. Do you not feel that this is a lovely idea and very inspiring, but it just isn't going to happen in other spaces?
Thank you. Well, I don't know what to say. No, okay, yeah, interesting. Thank you. I mean, I can say that it's a lot of the art in the film that is inspired by art pieces that have existed. I mean, I would say that the square is a little bit inspired of Nicolas Bourriot, if you know about him. Yeah, but he's like a French artist that is dealing with something that is called relational aesthetics. That is, it has a sociological approach to it. And the monkey performance that is in the film, it's inspired by a Russian artist that is called Oleg Kulik. And he was playing a dog in a museum in Stockholm, where there was a big sign next to him where it says, "Beware of the dog." And people that didn't respect that, he attacked them. And it ended up with that he actually bit the chief curator's daughter in the leg so badly that they had to call the police. So, and you know that they are cleaning away the piles of gravel, the piles of gravel that is in the movie. That is also something that have happened quite many times. You know that for example, it was a museum in Bologna where there was a cleaning lady taking away pieces of the installation, and the problem was that the installation was insured for 5 million euros or something like that. And Dominic West, that is playing on the stage, you know, in the Tourette syndrome scene. He plays actually Julian Schnabel, that is coming here tomorrow, right? Julian Schnabel.
It was today.
It's today, okay. It's so funny because we wanted to make fun about with Julian Schnabel. So he's playing a version of Julian Schnabel. I don't know if Julian had his pyjamas on him, but he's very often have a pyjamas on him when he's on stage.
Yeah.
Sophistication gone too far. I mean, if we talk about women who run with wolves, the animal side of beings, if that's suppressed too much, it comes out in unexpected ways, and a lot of people don't know what their body's going to do next.
Yeah, I didn't understand. Wild side of people. Wild side of people. In terms of art. Wild side of the people.
Do you miss that, or do you want?
Gentrification, I believe we're reaching such a high level of gentrification, sophistication, that people are kind of suppressed, but so they don't really acknowledge the wilder side in them that needs freer expression more, and in a way, in a big way, that your film is about that, isn't it? Surely, but it's a big problem.
I mean, I can say I'm very interested in many of the scenes where there is a social contract, and that social contract is broken in some way. And for an example, when you look at that on-stage Q&A, when there's a guy with Tourette syndrome in the audience, I think that I was interested in, you know, when these quasi-sophisticated art theory discussion is going on, and then someone is breaking that by saying just like dirty words. And I love that idea because I really have a problem with that part of the art world, actually. I'm a professor at the university in Gothenburg in film directing, and there's also a program for contemporary art or fine arts department. And the text that Elisabeth Moss is reading in the beginning, do you remember that one? Exhibition, non-exhibition, an evening conversation, blub, 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 blub. That was actually a text that I stole from the professor on the fine arts department.
Does he know?
He doesn't know it, actually. He still doesn't know it. And last week I met him in the corridor, and I was like pretending like nothing, you know. But it's really, really strange how that theory level have become in that way. So it have become a power language in order for people to, you know, maintain their position and say to other people that if you can't understand this, then you can't participate. So it's like maintaining your power position. So,
in relation to an article in the New York Times, I've just written a very strong letter, which is an answer to what a critic in the New York Times, Guy Colas, has been saying about contemporary dance and how sad he is that it hasn't really taken off. And I've written it from, I suppose, a Buddhist point of view that it's very dualistic to separate movement and say, well, this is contemporary, but that's not, and so on. And it's a bad starting place. And they've alienated so many people. When people come to the theatre and to dance shows and then engage till they've read the program, I say that's history. What happens now in this moment, like what's happening with us now, that's all that matters. And you've got everything to receive what you need.
I think there's a question here. Someone here. Sorry. First, then you.
Hello, good
I
night.
I have a question.
First of all, thank you very much for coming. It's always such a pleasure to have such an amazing artist among us. And I love the film as well, and congratulations once again for the prize in Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival. My question is, and do correct me if I'm wrong, please. I noticed that in such a film that represents a lot of exhibitionism and a lot of expressions, a lot of ways to express differently, which relates to the actual contemporary art. In a film that deals with a lot of different means of expression, the protagonist does seem to suffer throughout the whole film some kind of inner frustration within his own context among the people he lives with and among the people he interacts with. So my question is, in which way did you want to enhance this contrast between the main character's frustration and the place he lives in, the people he interacts with? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that, you know, what I loved about the idea about film was that I look at myself as Christian very much. You know, I believe that the idea about the square is a great idea. I believe in supporting the humanistic values. But at the same time, I wanted to challenge my own ideal, my own like humanistic values on a practical level. So that was basically the idea for the film. You know, even though that we believe in a humanistic society and we believe in an equal society, when it comes down to practice, it's very hard to live up to these ideals. And that was the idea. And then I wanted just to challenge him as much as possible in different situations. And for me, the film is very much about like that he is trying to deal with his role as a chief curator on this museum. And there's so many strings attached to him that he's trying to maneuver. And when he actually loses his job, in some ways he also becomes free. So that's the first time when he actually can take the consequences of his actions. So that was basically how I looked at it. That was the first time when he can go out and try to find the boy and try to take the consequences of his actions and maybe apologize or whatever, I don't know. But then the moment is over, so he has to live with his guilt. So it was a very simple plot line for me. That was like really the idea about the film. So yeah, like that.
Posso fazer uma pergunta aqui atrás? During the film, this is a private question, but during the film there is a lot of tension, and sometimes we feel the air. We miss the air, and we feel that we are against the wall. Do you want that, and which techniques you use to shoot during the film to provoke this? Another question is the movie criticized the mobile phone, and everybody, anytime, anywhere, everybody is connected. You, as professor, do you believe in this future that we are building?
The future of technology and cell phones.
What was the first question now? It was...
So the first question, how do you build attention, basically?
No, I think the tension is very much built out trying to find situations that the situation in itself creates the tension. So, yeah, I'm using different situations to create the tension. And yeah, it is actually as simple as that. I'm looking for that kind of situations. I love the scene between Anne and Christian when she's saying, how do we solve this? And it's like, solve what? Well, what have happened between us? You know, they are touching something that is very hard to talk about because there's like an unwritten rule or there's an unwritten contract that she's referring to. And that is creating the tension in that moment. And in another moment, the tension is made... for example, with a monkey performance artist, he, you know, you don't want to stand up and try to defend someone in that moment because then you maybe will be the prey. So I would definitely say that the tension is made from the different kind of situations. Yeah, okay, you're right. With the sound sometimes also, and with that share installation, then the idea was very much to create something that could interrupt them in an awkward moment. So suddenly they have to wait, you know, in the middle of a dialogue, they have to wait for this sound to finish and then they can continue. And they have to stand there and look at each other at that moment when the sound is going. So I'm very, very straight on when it comes to being a director, you know. I'm very straight on, like very simple humor, basically.
Maybe because I think it's part of the question. One of to achieve what he's saying, I know you do a lot of takes, and what do you do with the takes that you don't use? Sometimes you think about it. Oh, I have those.
No, but I can tell you a little bit about my method. I think that once again bringing sociology into the discussion. Then, you know, I consider a little bit that we are creating an experiment every time we are shooting a scene. So I'm putting up the actors, and then they have very specific situations that they are trying to deal with. And then I tell them, what would you do if you were in this situation? Would you act like I want you to act, like it says in the script? And then if the actor says, no, in this case I would do something completely different, then I can change the setup. So I make it possible for them to do what I want them to do. So what we do is like we are sculpturing the scene. We are trying out the scene in the beginning of the day. And then when we are starting to find the skeleton, then we are repeating over and over and over again. And it allows me to take risks in the beginning of the day. It allows me and the actors to take risks. So they can do things that actually feel stupid, but sometimes something brilliant comes up. And then we keep that. And then in the end of the day, when we have maybe made like around 40 takes or something like that, then I say, everybody ready? 5 takes left. And then we do a countdown. okay, 4 takes left, everybody, come on now, you know. You're trying to create a feeling that it's a very important football game that we are playing now. And we have to win this football game.
It's the climax.
Yeah. And then you know, and very often we are using one of these last 5 takes. And these last 5 takes, they look very, very similar. And I don't use the previous take, but it's a way of like processing, moving forward, and then in the end, creating something that has a very, very specific pattern, a very specific skeleton, but it should feel like it's the first time it happens. So it's a combination of trying to create something authentic, but with a very, very specific structure.
But the performance, the famous performance, the monkey thing, how many takes?
I would maybe 24 or something in average on every shot. We shot that scene for 4 days. So we had 1 day of rehearsal and then we had 3 days of shooting. And yeah.
Must be intense. I think you have a question.
So, before the movie, you were talking about sociology and social experiments. And one of the most powerful scenes in the movie is the dinner with the wild animal performer. Which is really powerful and frightening, the behavior of the other people in the room. And so when, after the movie, you told most of the scenes were based on true stories, where did this idea come from, of the dinner?
I mean, I love watching YouTube. A lot of the scenes that I have been doing in my films are inspired of YouTube clips. And the monkey performance scene is inspired of 2 YouTube clips, actually. One of them is called, one of them is inspired of an American punk rock artist that is called Gigi Allen. I don't know if it's anyone, you know who that is, yeah. You can check up on YouTube, Gigi Allen Boston. I have never ever seen any artist that is more, or musician that is more anarchistic than he is. When he has his performance, the audience are terrified. He's doing whatever he feels like, you know, he's beating up people that is coming too close to him. It doesn't matter if you're a woman, if you're a man or whatever. There's no rules at all. And my idea when I was making the scene, or starting to write the scene, that I wanted a tuxedo-dressed audience, you know, a very nice dressed audience, being on a very fancy dinner. They would sit there and they were starting to eat, you know, and suddenly Gigi Allen comes into the room. And I love the idea that the film should be premiered in Cannes, in competition, because, you know, in competition, the audience is sitting in a tuxedo. So I would love the idea that a tuxedo-dressed audience is sitting there looking on another tuxedo-dressed audience trying to deal with Gigi Allen. And then I'm also very interested in actors that is good in imitating monkeys. And I was Googling actor imitating monkey.
Thought about Andy Serkis?
Sorry? Yeah,
Andy Serkis?
Yeah, but actually Terry Notary that I found, and he's a very good friend of Andy Serkis. And then I found like Terry Notary, and he was doing a demo because he's a motion capture artist. You know, that he has this motion capture suit with green dots on him, and he's doing monkeys, for an example, for the Planet of the Apes. And he had a fantastic demo when he had his arm extensions, these arm extensions that he had. And he was like saying, okay, this is a chimpanzee. And then he walked exactly like a chimpanzee. It was brilliant, you know. And then he said, and this is the gorilla. And he walks exactly like a gorilla. And for me, that's the core of acting, you know. Because even a child can say, that guy or she is the best one in imitating a monkey. But when it comes to playing Hamlet, we need a lot of background knowledge before we can say, that's the best version of Hamlet. And then it becomes a lot of quasi talk, you know. But when it comes to bringing down acting down to imitating a monkey, then acting becomes like the core of acting, really. And I thought it was so interesting to watch him. And then I called him and I asked maybe he could do a performance artist when he's playing playing a monkey. And then I also wrote this text that was the voiceover that goes out in the speakers. And that says, soon you will be confronted by a wild animal. As you all know, the hunting instinct is triggered by weakness. If you show fear, the animal will sense it. If you try to escape, the animal will hunt you down. But if you remain perfectly still, then you can hide in the herd, safe in the knowledge that someone else will be the prey. And what that is pointing out is really the bystander effect. I don't know if you're familiar with the bystander effect, but the bystander effect is that when we are a lot of people in a public space or in a bus or wherever, and we don't know who is in charge, and when something scary is happening, we become paralyzed. And the reason that we become paralyzed is because we are thinking, don't take me, take someone else. And once again, if we have the sociological approach to this, what we usually do is that we put blame on the individual. We say, why didn't we take responsibility? What kind of cold time are we living in? Why are we so egoistical? But instead of looking at it in a behavioristic approach and a sociological approach, then it becomes like, okay, we actually are animals. And we are herd animals, and we get scared when something like this happens, and we don't know how to deal with it. And that is really what is happening. So the scene was very much about trying to highlight the bystander effect. And the scene had a very, very simple setup. You know, I wanted him to walk into the room, and the first thing he should do was to chase away the alpha male. And when he have chased away the alpha male, then it's time for reproduction. And I wanted this audience, you know, with this tuxedo-dressed audience that is sitting there and so civilized in the beginning. I wanted them to be this civilized, idea about themselves in the beginning, but then turn into wild animals in the end of the scene. So that was basically the idea. And the first take that we did, then the audience didn't know what to expect when Terry Norter entered the room. And what I did then was that I was recording the sound, because their reaction and the laughter and the sounds that the audience or the extras did was so beautiful. And then I used that sound to put on over the takes when I was dealing with editing. But then we did like, I don't know how many takes, but
the first take must be incredible.
No, I mean it was not. The sound was incredible. The take was not that good.
Okay. More questions? I think there's one there.
Hi, thanks for being here. I have a question about the meaning of the chimpanzee that lives in the apartment of Anna. I mean, I understand the absurdity of that, and also the confusion that it creates when Christian sees him or her. But can you elaborate a bit further on the meaning of the chimpanzee?
You get this question all the time, no?
Yeah, but it's a good question. I think that, you know, before we started the shooting, then I read through the script, and I felt that there is something that is missing. And there was something about the film that was not wild enough. I felt it was too safe, and that one thing that I think is quite boring myself if I watch a movie is that if I understand exactly how the movie should be told, and then it never surprises me. And it was like me and the producer, we went actually away for a weekend to try to figure out what should we do with the film. And we were thinking and talking, and you know, we spent many hours to try to figure out what we should do. And just before we went back to Gothenburg, where we live, then we was like, maybe Anne should have a chimpanzee in the apartment. And in the moment when that came up, we realized this is a really, really good idea. Because exactly as you said, I think you pointed out why the chimpanzee is there. Because if you watch a movie for an hour and then suddenly a chimpanzee comes walking into the apartment without its with the contract that this is completely normal, then the audience, of course, anything can happen in a film like that, right? And that was the idea, to get the audience on the toes. You know, what am I supposed to suspect? Anything can happen, and then, of course, there's a monkey theme in the film a little bit with Terran Autry and these installations, video installation that is in the film. So, of course, I felt that it fitted into the film also because of that. And the monkey theme, that is another aspect, of course. If you look at how monkeys are used in art history and in paintings and things like that, in literature, it's very often there to highlight, to make us remember that we also are animals. So it's like a combination of that, I would say.
Time for the last question.
Just stroke me as a human cage. So I realize what your thought about the square where you can leave your things or rest. But I thought of it as human being on display, actually. And because it's a square, it could be a circle. That wouldn't strike me as someone being on display. So it's just to share a thought, actually.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that a square is like for me, it's a symbol of something that is like civilization. You know, we are creating a rule. It's almost like that we are creating the rules of a football game, or when we are making games when we are kids or things like that. I think it's interesting when we start to talk about culture and the culture that we are living in, and what is changing our behavior and what is creating our behavior. And I really, really think it's something that is it's very simple what creates our behavior. I think, for an example, that I think that human being is an imitating creature. So what we see is changing our behavior. And just to take an example about that, I read an article about Robert Saviano that wrote Gomorrah, the book about the gangsters in Neapel. And he said that a half year after Pulp Fiction was released in the world, the young gangsters started to shoot with the guns on the side like this, instead of the vertical grip. I don't know if it was Pulp Fiction really, but one of Tarantino movie.
Or John Woo.
Yeah, maybe. And the consequences of shooting with the gun on the side is that it's very hard to hit the enemy. So the shootouts became very, very bloody, and the police had a mess cleaning up afterwards. And I mean, when it comes to like creating a culture, then I'm improvising from your question, but it like if you create like certain kind of simple rules on how we should behave, these rules, if we get attention to these rules, if we really get attention to them, if we make people talk about them, if we get them into people's minds, then we will start to behave in that way also. So I think the impact that culture has on us is the impact of how many people that sees it and how many people that got struck by that impact. So, yes.
Now it's really the last question, because we have to go.
Hello, thank you for your film and thank you for being here. I'm not really sure if I liked the film or not. First, when it ended, I thought I really liked it very much. You talked about sociology in the beginning, and then in the end I thought, okay, this is a very nice film about class privilege and how people grab the privilege and reproduces it. But now you're talking about something else, which is not sociology, and you haven't mentioned what I thought it was the core of the film. And I'm a bit confused. Could you comment on that? Thank you.
So basically, she said that first you said it's sociology, but then you're talking about other stuff, and it's not the core of the film. If you want to comment on that.
Hard, but no, but I mean, no, for me it makes sense. They are connected. What I'm talking about is connected. I think it is sociology. Everything I'm talking about is sociology. No, but I mean, no, I am sorry, I can't answer.
So last question now.
I think this kind of relates to what you were saying, in the sense that everything that is in the film, I found kind of to be a test. And not only in the film were we watching a lot of people being tested, but I felt like myself, as I was watching the film, was also being tested as far as how I laughed, when I laughed, what I reacted to. I mean, I'm somebody that watches a lot of the movies, but normally it's at home alone. So when you're here and everyone is reacting in a specific way and you're reacting in a specific way, I felt kind of like, wait a minute, should I be reacting this way at this point? And was that something maybe that you thought about in advance as far as this testing and sociological testing all the time, which I really liked, but.
I think that one thing that I really, really love is when a scene in one moment can be very funny and then the next moment it can feel horrifying. That you are thrown between different kind of feelings, and it's really not a genre. The audience in itself have to decide how should I relate to this and what should I think about this, and that is maybe. I mean, I actually made a short film that is interesting to talk about that is called Incident by a Bank. That is a reconstruction of a failed robbery attempt that I was an eyewitness to. And it was one of the most absurd things that I've ever seen. And it was, you know, it was surreal, it was comical, it was very dramatic, and all these things were at the same time. So I felt when I was trying to make that short film, it was important to me to try to create something that you couldn't place in a simple way and saying it's like an action movie or it's a comedy or whatever. It was like trying to capture details that was going on in real life that was pointing out very, very contradictory feelings. So yeah, I think I try to make the movie a little bit hard to place for the audience.
The little girl hiding as a hat, and at the end of that film was all about the darkness, the massive darkness.
Bem, obrigado. Thanks, Ruben.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks you so much.